we missing anyone?
It's the wrong.
Do we? Welcome, everyone. I would like to apologise for the slight delay there. We're just having some technical difficulties. Welcome, everyone, to tonight's meeting of the Service Delegated Committee. Before we commence the meeting, I request that all mobile telephones are turned off or switched to silent. My name is Councillor Rob Baillieu and I chair this committee. I'll start by introducing my fellow councillors. Seated to my left at the horseshoe table in the council chamber are Councillors Lisa Hollingsworth, Councillor Shima Ibuki, Councillor Mick Nolan, Councillor Felicity Sinfield. On the opposite side, we have Councillor Victor Franco, our Deputy Mayor, Councillor Mal Osborne-Smith, Councillor Sophie Tawney, our Mayor, Councillor John Friend Pereira, and Councillor Chris Pattis. I also acknowledge our CEO, Mr. Philip Storer, to my right, and our Manager, Governance and Legal, Mr. Brian Wee, to my left. There are other officers in attendance tonight, and they will be introduced as they present their reports. The purpose of the Service Delegated Committee is to deal with issues relating to the provision of human and physical services and Council's infrastructure. For those in the gallery presenting this evening, when we come to the agenda item, it will be introduced by an officer. I will then call you one by one to come forward and address Council. I'll ask speakers to sit at the top of the horseshoe table, and I'll invite those against the officer's recommendations to speak first, followed by those in favour. When making a submission, you're requested to present your viewpoint clearly and concisely on why you agree or disagree with the proposal. You may suggest an alternative approach which will satisfy your concerns. Please do not repeat what earlier speakers have said and keep the discussion focused on relevant issues. There is a limit of 3 minutes for each speaker, and that includes councillors. As chairperson, I reserve the right to vary that. At the 2.5 minute mark, I will ring a bell which will indicate you have 30 seconds remaining and you need to conclude your presentation. After you've spoken, please remain at the table while I ask if any councillor has a question for you. For those in the gallery this evening, I would like to take this opportunity to remind you to extend due courtesy and respect to each other and to the committee as a whole. This includes remaining quiet while others are addressing the meeting and not disrupting the decision-making process of the committee. And just to finish, I would like to encourage all submitters, officers and councillors to just speak directly into the microphone. This will ensure that everyone can clearly hear the discussion. We'll now move to apologies. Mr. Wee, are there any apologies for this evening?
Through you, Chair, Councillor Galt is an apology this evening.
We'll now move to the adoption and confirmation of the minutes of the Service Delegated Committee meetings held on the 8th of September 2025. Councillors, can I please have a motion to adopt and confirm the minutes? Councillor Abuki.
Happy to move, thank you.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Fran Pereira.
Happy to second that.
I will now put the motion to a vote. All those in favour? I declare the motion carried. Declaration of conflict of interest of any councillor or council officer. Councillors and council officers, are there any conflicts of interest that you wish to foreshadow for the matters on the agenda tonight? There are none. We now move to item 4.1, Gardeners Creek, the no glyphosate trial, and this will be introduced by David Shepherd, our Manager of Environmental Sustainability and Open Spaces.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. This report presents the outcomes of the no glyphosate trial around Gardeners Creek, which has been running for close to 3 years now. The trial was created in response to community concerns in relation to glyphosate and its impact on biodiversity and human health. Council has an integrated weed management practice in place, which means that utilising herbicides is the last option considered. To minimise weeds in the first place, we ensure we densely plant and mulch garden beds. Where weeds do occur, we look first to handweed or brush cut. We use heat and steam in sensitive areas, with our final option being to select the most appropriate herbicide. We then consider the application method to minimise the amount used. We will dab, inject or spot spray before any sort of broad area spraying is undertaken. The advice from the governing body in Australia is that glyphosate is safe to use in accordance with label instructions and safety data sheets. Our staff and contractors are trained in safe storage, handling of chemicals and, where appropriate, PPE when doing so. The outcomes of the trial were that the weed coverage and condition remained fairly consistent at the trial sites, which is a poor result in comparison to other sites where glyphosate was used, which saw a 13% decrease in weed coverage. The trial also found that the cost in delivering alternative methods was higher than using glyphosate. In addition, we have not increased the area managed for biodiversity around Gardeners Creek during the trial period, as it is impractical to attempt this without using glyphosate. For these reasons, the officer recommendation is to conclude the trial and support a weed management approach that continues to minimise the use of herbicides. Thank you, Chair.
We will now move to public submissions. 2 people have indicated they wish to make a submission on this matter. Both have supported the officer's recommendations. Once I have announced your name, please sit at the top of the horseshoe table, and if a submitter is not present when the name is called, we'll move on to the next speaker. I remind submitters there is a strict time limit of 3 minutes, and at 2.5 minutes, you'll hear this bell. Please commence the submission with your name and the suburb in which you reside. Our first speaker will be John McLean, followed by Alison Wright.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm John McLean, and I'd like to speak in favour of the report submitted to the Council. I'll keep to the 3 minutes. There's a lot one can say about this thing, but I'll concentrate on the science. There are a number of philosophical issues raised when one starts to talk about herbicides, but that's a council matter, and so I'll try and stick to the science. Recognising that the council also oversees appropriate and proper expenditure of money, and there are competing priorities, and that's an important consideration here, I feel. The other thing is that there is always matters of public and national good, and people with vested interests or particular points of view have got to suppress their other feelings about issues. I'll point out that glyphosate has been around since it was discovered in 1950, and it's been on the market since 1970. This is rather good because it means there's been an inordinate amount of scrutiny of that chemical. Probably no chemical has ever been subjected to more scrutiny, and that means that any defects and problems are identified, particularly occupational health and safety for those that are manufacturing and formulating it because they're exposed to high concentration. I'd also point out that glyphosate puts residues in a number of food items. Almost all crops and all dried products have got or can have glyphosate residues unless you're taking something that's certified free. So it is regularly finding its way into human food in very low amounts, and that is an area where I've worked since the 1972. I'd have no hesitation in supporting the use of glyphosate in the council areas. Probably the biggest, the greatest amount of attention's been drawn to a report by IARC, the International Agency for Research in Cancer, an interesting organisation. I've worked with some of the people there, and it would seem to me that they have to get public funding, and so the way you get public funding is to frighten people that they're going to get cancer. It's listed as a probable animal carcinogen, but not in humans. And it's interesting that the IARC classification of known carcinogens includes alcohol, red meat and smoking, and there'd be hardly a person in
John,
this room.
I'm going to have to ask you to just quickly wrap up in 15 seconds, please.
Pardon?
I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up. You've just gone over your time.
I can't.
You've just gone over your time,
Did I?
but
Eh? That's 3 minutes. Oh, sorry, I didn't hear the bell. Okay, well, I'll stop there, but it's a very broad subject. Thank you for reminding me.
now, John, some of the councillors will likely have questions for you. It was probably remiss of me not to mention that you're a Professor Emeritus. But we might start with a question from Councillor Mal Osborne-Smith.
Thank you, Chair. You stole my question. I was going to ask you what's your background, and could you explain for the benefit of us councillors where your interest and knowledge comes from?
I got qualifications in agriculture, veterinary science, and a doctorate in biochemistry. But I've worked in this area, as I said, since the early 1970s. And in fact, my main interest has been in the toxicity of chemicals and drugs. And I started in that area long before there were even textbooks written, because it's a great teaching tool. And so you pick up the knowledge that way. And I've reviewed nearly 200 chemicals for various people. Particularly the Australian government, and I've chaired a committee of the World Health Organization and FAO for 18 years, and developed policy as well as looking at chemicals. So that's my background.
Impressive. Thank you very much.
Councillor Franco.
Thanks. I was also going to ask about your qualifications, but so that's very impressive. Are you able to comment on the alternative herbicides that might be an alternative to glyphosate, and how you see the alternatives in respect of glyphosate?
Look, as the Deakin study submitted covers it all, but really it is the best product. And your report, for example, refers to only one case of occupational health and safety, but I would suggest to you that there are many that go unreported, and particularly it leaves out infections. And so if you injure yourself while you're doing something and get infected, that doesn't appear. So the only bit of information I have is that mechanical removing of weeds and that sort of thing is about 2.5 times more likely to cause injury than spraying. That was some information given to me by the South Melbourne Council when I lived in that area.
Thank you, Mr. McLean. I was going to ask about that point. My question was about the alternative chemicals to glyphosate, the alternative herbicides, but I do have a further question in relation to the point you've made. The council officers report are recommending the use of glyphosate in the last resort and using mechanical mechanisms such as hand weeding and steaming as a first resort. So you're saying there's OH&S benefits in not having glyphosate as the last resort, but actually using it to avoid excessive human labour and risk. Is that correct?
Yeah, your suggestion, yes, bringing it further up the tree, so to speak. Is that what you're?
Yeah, I'm asking, is that what you're recommending?
Yeah, that's what I would do, because the amount of information known about the chemical and its safety is enormous, and so if you can lift it out of mechanical methods and some of the other methods that are used, like steam heating, then you do make the environment for the workers safer. And also there's a matter of expense. I mean, I noticed there that you used fluazifop in one of the trials. I don't know whether you realise, but the concentrate is about $120 a litre. So you probably should have someone standing over it before it's stolen. Yes, so that's my response there.
Thank you.
Councillor Ibuki.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thank you, Professor McClay. I just want to ask that, you say that glyphosate doesn't have as much harm, or doesn't do as much harm as a lot of other things that we ingest or that we experience in everyday life. But for instance, you say that sunshine, we use sunscreen, alcohol, you cannot drink while you're pregnant. Processed foods, we know that we don't eat that every day. And so how do you reconcile the fact that the examples that you've used, which are everyday things, we do mitigate against that? So even though you're saying the degree to which it is dangerous is not great, it is still probably carcinogenic, and it has been restricted severely in some overseas countries and banned in one overseas country. It's been restricted in a lot of domestic use, but yes, we still have some residue in crops. Can you just comment about, what is the quantum of harm that you feel it needs to be to not be an acceptable use?
I think you've got to look at the overall picture. It's difficult to quantify these things, but the safety factors that you've got built into its use are extremely large. I mean, for example, if you look at residues in food, the safety factors are promulgated on the no effect level, and then you've got safety factors that take into account food consumption, and and you look at the worst case, and some people eat enormous amount of foods in a particular category, and that's taken into account. Where there might be problems with the data, instead of putting a 100-fold safety factor on it, you put 2,000 on it. So the protection that's built into the system is enormous. But look, there are so many other things that deserve attention in relation to control of weeds in a municipality that I think we've put the cart before the horse. Does that answer your question?
It does, I guess, but I'm not sure whether I agree with the logic. You know, for me, something that has some question around it being a carcinogenic chemical, I don't weigh that up against, you know, the cost savings that you would make for council.
Okay, I'll try and answer that. In relation to its carcinogenicity, you're probably referring to the court cases in the United States, for example. Okay, if you're going to run a court case with a class action, you pick a disease which is prevalent in the community, and in the case of the court case in the United States, lymphoma is the one, and it runs in the community at quite a high rate. And we know that we know some of the causes of some of them, but we don't know all of the causes. So you pick something that there's not much known about, then you run a class action, and then the American system, if there's any doubt, they have a payout. Now, in many cases, the payout is dictated by insurance companies because it's cheaper to settle that way. And don't forget, in Australia, there has been a failed case in relation to a class action that was thrown out because it just didn't stand up. And so the IARC thing is really a red herring. And the court cases are really red herrings. They say nothing about the real carcinogenicity of glyphosate. And most regulatory authorities still permit its use. And don't forget that quite often, whilst people say that the chemical might be banned in a certain country, we don't know the use pattern. And until you know the use pattern, you can't find out why it's banned, you see. So it's much more complicated than just saying, oh, it's carcinogenic. I don't believe that it's carcinogenic. I've looked at it ever since glyphosate came on the market. I've looked at the original data from IARC, and in fact, it's under review right as we speak at IARC, because I think that they don't realise that, they have realised that their pronouncement is a bit rubbery.
Thank you. And I just might note that it has been banned for household and certain types
Councillor
of
Ibuki,
use.
is this a question?
Yes. So could you comment then why you think that countries like Luxembourg, Germany, France, Netherlands, Belgium, Austria, Sri Lanka, Vietnam and Colombia have restricted use?
Well, I haven't looked at the data there, but it's not based on science. I can assure you there's just no scientific evidence that we've got that points the finger at glyphosate. And don't forget, it's been used for a long while, and people that are making it and formulating it and packaging it are exposed to high levels, and in the past, not much protection, and yet they don't show any problems. And that's where you start to pick up problems with carcinogenicity. It's not the end users, it's the people that are formulating it and packaging it and working in the factory. I have every confidence that glyphosate is safe. And as I said to you, many of these issues, as I said in the beginning, many of these issues are philosophical, and so they're not based on science. And what I said to you was that I would try and stick to the science, what I know.
Councillor Friend Pereira.
Thank you, Chair. Professor McLean, I just wanted to confirm, so you're in favour of the officers' recommendations?
Yes, I am, very much so.
Great.
Yes.
And then a follow-up question. Given your familiarity with IARC, could you just help clarify or explain the difference between a hazard assessment and a risk assessment?
Sorry, can you?
Could you explain the difference from IARC, the difference between a hazard assessment and a risk assessment?
They go hand in hand, I guess. You select, you first look at the hazard, and then you select risk strategies to minimise the effect of hazard if necessary. Does that explain it to you?
I guess what I'm trying to get to is, because I'm not familiar with them, what would you say is the key difference between a hazard assessment and a risk assessment with something like glyphosate or another herbicide?
Well, the hazard assessment is all of the science that establishes that it's a hazard, and the risk assessment is what strategies are necessary to manage that hazard. Is that's
yeah, so the difference being what the hazard posed, but then the risk can be mitigated by appropriate.
Oh, yeah. Well, you see, you apply safety factors in the case of food, for example.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's the job of the regulator. I might say that this approach to regulation is only a relatively new science, and it's been unfortunately a bit of a Rafferty's rules up to, say, 30 years ago, where the users were dictating how things were used rather than the other people that are involved in the process.
Okay, thank you.
Conscious of time, Councillor Nolan.
Thank you, Professor McLean, for coming along.
Oh, sorry, yeah, I didn't, you've gone.
Thank you, Professor McLean, for coming along tonight. I want to ask this very politely and very respectfully. I just want to hear from you, and don't take this the wrong way, but I'd like to understand whether you've worked as an academic or as a consultant and or an expert witness, and whether you've ever been on the side of being remunerated or representing or being a witness for a chemical company.
Look, my employment, I worked for the University of Melbourne as an academic for 25 odd years. I worked for Swinburne University as an academic and administrator, and then from about the year 2000 odd to about 10 years ago, I worked for myself. But I've given advice to just about every spectrum that you mentioned, but I tend to give it fearlessly. And I've appeared in a lot of court cases, but it's rather interesting. After I sit down with the lawyers, they get together and settle out of court because it's such a complex issue. But I have no conflict of interest. I've worked as a consultant for a period of time for a veterinary company, but only part-time. I mean, it was an interest that I had, but they had their problems too.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, pretty
I'm hard to
reasonably,
buy.
yes.
I'm hard to buy. But look, I adopt a philosophy that very often the best you can do is to have everybody equally unhappy.
Thank
Councillor
you.
Nolan?
No more questions, I don't think. Thank you.
Is that satisfactory for you?
Yes.
I
Councillors?
mean, we could talk a long time, but in the interests of time, I've got a flavour. The first part of your life was very much academic, and then you've worked for a number of different people in different capacities.
But I mean, I worked as a representative for FAO and chaired the Joint Expert Committee on Food Additives, a joint one between FAO and WHO, and I chaired that for 18 years. Now, I was only paid expenses to go along.
Can I ask one more question, Chair? What's your motivation for coming along tonight, Professor?
My interest in agricultural and chemicals and veterinary drugs. I've followed the glyphosate issue for a long while, and I can understand why people have reservations. But I've been retired for some time, and I'm just interested in it. It's something that's consumed my life. Regulation of chemicals and chemical safety. But no one's paid me to come along, no one encouraged me to come along. I just saw it as an issue that was raised. If you want to find a comprehensive report on glyphosate, warts and all, then get the Wikipedia entry on glyphosate. And it will tell you everything that you need to know about it, much more than I've been able to. You go on.
Thank you very much. I think in the interest of time, and I really appreciate you coming along tonight. Thank you.
Yeah. If I could just add, I'm sorry, I'm being a bit presumptive here, but look, there's nothing more soul destroying than weeding. And if you can, you people have weeded your garden and eventually it wears out. But if you can extend the involvement of council staff in weed control right across the board, you enhance their working environment and they get better reward for it and show more interest. And I think that this is an important thing because integrated pest management using the best set of facilities is the best thing. And I've looked at this report.
Professor, we're just getting very, very short of time.
Yeah, righto, that's fine.
We might have time for one more question, then we're going to have to do some strange shenanigans where we adjourn the meeting and start another meeting. The councillors now understand what I'm getting at. So, Councillor Tawney, did you have a question for the Professor?
I do. Thank you. Thank you, Professor. That's been really interesting to hear your point of view and obviously great experience in this. I'm just wondering if you know, so it's been around since 1970, so 50 years of use, and that's part of your point is that there's been no,
Yes.
but like something like asbestos, I mean, do you know how long that was around for before we really understood the impact?
No,
Do you know something like asbestos?
Yes.
And how long that was around and in use before we realised how dangerous it was for human health?
Well, yes, but that doesn't negate the relativities. I mean, asbestos was fingered a long while ago, and no one did anything about it.
Yeah. So
but
do you think 50 years is long enough to say we don't have enough proof that it's harmful, even though the WHO said it is probably carcinogenic?
Yes. Yeah, but look, look at the time frame and look at the exposure to glyphosate compared with, say, even asbestos. It was mainly related to people that were using it and a limited number, but glyphosate pervades everywhere, and there's so many people have used it, and there's been so many investigations. One of the reasons why it's received such a lot of investigation is that it's used, Monsanto have a patent on genetically modified crops that are resistant to glyphosate, so you can grow your corn, and then when the weeds come up, you can spray the paddock with glyphosate and kill off the weeds. But if you're anti-GM, then this exposes consideration of glyphosate for another reason. And so it gets more attention put on it. Does that answer your question?
It sounds like it's answered the question.
Yeah.
Councillors, are there any final questions for the Professor? There are none.
Yeah.
Thank you, Professor. You've put the case very well.
I'm sorry to take up your time. It's a bit presumptive, but just in final, could I suggest that that you get together a small release summary and put that about that's more compact than this larger document for the consumption of people, so they can get an overall view of what's considered and what you've done. And honestly, I would be happy to sit down and render assistance there if I could. I'm just interested in this.
Thank you, Professor. Now, Alison is due to speak next, but the council has to go through a quick administrative process just to extend the time that we have for this meeting. So I'm in search of a motion to adjourn the meeting in order to enable the opening of the council meeting. Councillor Tawney.
Happy to put forward that motion.
Do we have a seconder?
Seconded.
Is anyone opposed? No one is opposed. I'll now put the motion to a vote. All those in favour? I declare the motion carried. Declare this meeting of the Service Delegated Committee adjourned for now.
Council meeting of the 13th of October. Before we commence the meeting, may I please ask for a motion to adjourn this meeting? Councillor Baillieu.
So moved.
Do I have a second for that? Councillor Friend-Pereira.
Second.
Is anyone opposed? No. All those in favour? I declare the council meeting adjourned.
Administration. Councillors, I'm in search of a motion to resume the Service Delegated Committee meeting. Councillor Hollingsworth.
So moved.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Fran Pereira.
Seconded.
I'll now put the motion to a vote. All those in favour? I declare the motion carried. Our next speaker for tonight is Alison Wright.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Alison Wright. I live in Glen Iris. I'm here as a representative of one of the Friends groups who work closely with the Council Biodiversity Officers. And we are in support of lifting the ban of the glyphosate for limited and considered use. So we spend a lot of time weeding. So far in 2025, we have spent over 460 hours, not only weeding, but planting and mulching. Our objective is to improve the biodiversity of our area and expand that area. And the only way to expand it is to knock down the grasses and weeds that are there with glyphosate, mulch it 15 centimeters, let it sit until it's ready to be planted. So we are in favor of using glyphosate in a limited and considered use by people who are trained to use it in a safe and responsible way. That's less than 3 minutes.
That was fantastic. Thank you, Alison.
Okay.
I think some of the councillors will have questions for you, though.
Sure.
Councillor Ibuki.
Thank you, and thank you for the great work that you do as well.
Thank you.
When you say limited and considered, what makes you say that?
There are times when we just can't do hand weeding if we're opening up new areas for biodiversity. So to knock down the grasses, the lawn grasses and the weeds that are there, the best way to do it is we don't have any open water where we work. I understand the situation may be different close to open water, but where in our area, we want those weeds knocked down and covered with mulch so that it's well and truly dead before we go back a year or two later and plant. So.
Councillor Franco.
Thanks, Alison.
All right.
I'm going to ask you a question that follows from the previous speaker.
Sure.
And you've pretty much said it, but the previous speaker spoke about, and I appreciate your volunteers rather than council contractors or council staff, but the quality of work, meaningful work that can be done if the available labour is used not for hand weeding or other mechanisms that are much slower. Do you want to comment on the meaningfulness of the work? I know it's a philosophical point, but I'm curious how you might see that as well as the time involved.
I have to say, when the group is together, whether they're weeding or planting or mulching, they're enjoying each other's company. They're out in the fresh air, often in sunshine, sometimes not. But the value comes from working together and the people that are coming up and down the parkway commenting on what a great job we've done. That's where the value is. So I don't mind weeding myself. Nobody else complains about weeding. We make a big pile and leave it for the council officer to come and pick up. And the parkway looks terrific. We've been working there about 3 years and it's looking great. Just at the moment, there are places where the weeds are ahead of us and we do not want them sprayed. We will get to them. But when we're opening new areas, the only way to do that is with careful and considered limited use.
And that's because of the scale of...
Yep.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Councillor Osborne-Smith.
Thank you, Chair, and Alison, thank you and your fellow Friends groups for the huge amount of work you do to improve biodiversity and the nature that exists in our environment. Thank you. Quick question. have I got it right that the most amount of glyphosate and other weed killers is at the start of the biodiversity cycle, and such that after 1 or 2 or multiple years, when the understory gets a hold of it, that weeding becomes much less problematic? Is that the case?
That's my understanding. I'm not an expert, but my experience is
yeah.
that the weeds are sprayed at the beginning and then not again. So it's a
Right.
one,
'Cause
unless,
Yeah, okay.
I'm
that's
not
all
in
I
the
meant.
best position to
No,
comment
but you
on that.
work on this all the time. You see areas that are
But I
new
don't-
and areas that are established, and I'm just
Yeah.
trying to get a feel for the life cycle of adding biodiversity. And of course, we've got some big plans at council for a substantial increase in biodiversity. I'm just trying to understand if weed poisoning becomes less of an issue as that understory is developed. And I think
Yep.
you've answered that question. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Councillors, are there any final questions for Alison? There are none. Thank you, Alison.
Thank you.
We now return to officers for matters arising.
Thank you, Chair. It was excellent to hear two very different perspectives from our community, a science perspective and a community participation perspective in support of the report tonight. There's no matters arising from that we need to immediately address. Thank you.
Councillors, are there any questions of officers? Councillor Franco.
Yeah, I have one question, Chair. Could officers comment on, the report recommends very limited or last resort use of glyphosate, and as my colleague mentioned in the question before, we are planning a very significant increase in biodiversity areas across our municipality. If there are, the first speaker, Professor McLean, raised the issue of OH&S risks associated with, say, hand weeding and other mechanisms versus, and as well as the cost. So he raised the cost implications, given the wide-scale expansion, and B, potential OH&S risks that exist with mechanical mechanisms and hand weeding. Do you want to comment on those two relative to glyphosate?
Thank you, and through you, Chair. If I understand your question correctly, Councillor Franco, you're asking for a comparison between the use of glyphosate and mechanical methods in terms of safety?
And cost, yes, because the report seems to assume that the lowest cost, or it probably doesn't go into that, but the safety is just assumed that glyphosate is probably less safe, but that may not be the case.
No, thank you, and through you, Chair. I think as pointed out by our presenter tonight, the risks around glyphosate are different and probably less than mechanical methods. Mechanical methods do introduce other risks for officers or members of our community undertaking that in the manual handling aspect of that type of work. Glyphosate, the risks around glyphosate can certainly be managed through using it in accordance with label directions and the safety data sheets and with appropriate PPE, which is what our staff and contractors do. In terms of cost, glyphosate has been shown to be the most cost-effective weed management methodology out there. That was demonstrated through the Deakin report and has been reconfirmed through this trial as well.
Thank you.
Councillor Tawney.
Thank you, through you, Chair. So why did we do the trial in the first place?
Through you, Chair, it was a council resolution to undertake the trial.
And was that because there were concerns about glyphosate?
Through you, Chair, we presented a report to Council about weed management practices. There was an alternative motion presented on the night by a councillor, and that was supported by the council as a whole. I understand that was because of some community concerns raised with that councillor, but I was not privy to that.
And I'm just really struggling with this, I think. I know that there's other councils across Melbourne who are looking at different uses. So we ban it near playgrounds, but we do use it on a sporting ground at the beginning of its life when we're resurfacing it. We're going to use it in biodiversity areas, and the word biodiversity and Roundup kind of confused me. I'm just really struggling with this decision, and I've heard the comments tonight, but the report said that it's $18,000 extra a year in manual labour if we didn't use glyphosate at Gardeners Creek. That's our labour.
Yep, through you, Chair, yes, that's the increased cost for this small area.
And then $100,000 across Burundara.
Only for biodiversity areas.
Only for biodiversity areas. And that's all our labour. So the friends groups wouldn't have to do extra weeding. We would do, that's the cost for us to do that.
That's correct. So that's in addition to the work that the Friends Group's already undertaken. Will continue.
So $100,000 a year to not use Roundup or glyphosate in all our biodiverse areas. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Friend Pereira.
Just a brief one from me. Can I just confirm we do have an integrated weed management policy, but it's internal facing?
Through you, Chair, yes, we have an integrated weed management practice, I would say, rather than policy, because we don't have a formal policy adopted.
And there is a web page that outlines some of the key principles from that. Would it be possible, pending a decision tonight, and leaning on Professor McLean's suggestion that we put up some kind of summary of tonight's report, maybe not with all the annexes, which can be quite heavy, but just to bring the subject to a conclusion for the public and as a point of reference for them.
Through you, Chair, that is something that we can certainly do.
Thank you.
Councillor Nolan.
Thank you, Mr. Shepherd. Just picking up on the point from Mayor Tawney there, I just want to make sure that we're right on this. So 100,000 seems trivial, not trivial, but within the whole council budget, not that material. What's the percentage of the biodiversity areas that you're referring to? We're obviously managing a lot more than those biodiversity areas. What's that hectares of biodiversity areas, and what is the hectares of all other space that is able to, we're able to use glyphosate on, just to get an idea of what that 100,000 would scale up to if it was a complete ban?
Thank you, and through you, Chair, we currently have around 55 hectares of biodiversity space in 520 hectares of open space. So roughly 10% of our open space is biodiversity area. So you could multiply that 100,000 by 10 to get a number. I would say though that our largest proportion of glyphosate usage is actually through the streetscapes contract rather than in open space. So there would be if you were to take glyphosate out of that contract, I'm not sure we could successfully do the work, but it would be a hugely expensive exercise to attempt to do that. I'd also add that cost is not the only factor that we should be considering in this equation. As I mentioned in the introduction tonight, while these areas have not had an increase in weed cover, they have performed more poorly than the other biodiversity areas where we have been able to use glyphosate. So we are seeing a negative impact on our biodiversity spaces.
And so 10 times 100,000 is $1 million. If you were to hazard a guess, and I know you don't like hazarding a guess, but if we were to then include streetscapes and people maintaining whatever else those people are doing around trees. And Nate, do you have a feel for that?
From memory, I understand that contract was something like $360,000 a year. I think you'd be looking at probably 3 times. To use an alternate herbicide, you'd need to increase the frequency of application as well. So, you know, if I have to hazard a guess, you know, 3, 4, 5 times the dollar value, but also increases in frequency of application as well. And I mean, that's putting aside instances where we do use glyphosate on a large scale in open space, such as the sports grounds that were mentioned earlier. You can imagine how time consuming and difficult it would be to undertake that process in a mechanical method.
Can I ask one more question through you, Chair? Are you aware of any other councils in Australia that have brought in a complete ban?
Through you, Chair, I'm aware of other councils in Victoria that have previously had complete bans in place that have reversed those bans and reintroduced the use of glyphosate because of the experiences they had around increased weeds and increased customer complaints.
Thank you.
Councillor Sinfield.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, I'm wondering if officers might be able to enlighten me as to the intention or otherwise to use goats moving forward. I understand and note in the report that at the expense of $9,000, African boar goats were used for a period of time during this trial. Can we look forward to that in the future?
Through you, Chair, we don't have any specific plans for the use of goats at the moment, but there are some areas in Boroondara where the terrain is such that goats are perhaps the best weed management method, so it is not out of the realms of possibility.
Great, thank you.
What a goat question. Councillor Tawney.
Just one more quick question. Is there a way for the community to access, I don't know whether an annual or just a frequent public report on where we're using it, the locations, volumes, incidents, alternatives? Is that something we could put on our website for interested community members?
Through you, Chair, it is not something we publish at the moment. It is information that we do collect and have available. It would be a small exercise to collate that and make that available on some sort of regular basis.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Franco.
Just following up on the Mayor's question there, we do place notices on site when glyphosate's being used, don't we? Can you comment on that?
Through you, Chair, yes, we do place signs out whenever there's any sort of herbicide usage being undertaken so that the public are aware that that practice is underway. In most cases, we also have advance notice that spraying is going to occur in a certain time period as well.
Councillors, if there's no further questions of officers, I'm in search for a motion. Councillor Fren Pereira.
I'm happy to move the motion as shown on the screen.
Do you have a seconder? Councillor Osborne-Smith.
Yes, happy to second that, Chair.
To assist the mover, is anyone opposed? There are 2 opposed. Councillor Fren Pereira, as the mover, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Yes, I'll be brief given the volume of expert information that we've had presented and contained in the report. I have grappled with this somewhat at a personal level, but at the end of the day, I'm not here to represent my own personal views or interests, but the best interests of council and the community as a whole, on the whole. So considering strategic considerations of environmental integrity, financial sustainability, organisational capacity and safety, governance, compliance and accountability, and community health and confidence, I feel that the officers' reports is clear that we have given the trial a go. We extended the trial for an additional year. We gathered data as to its effectiveness, its shortcomings and its concerns. And now is the time to take those learnings, which I know officers will do, and integrate them into our practices going forward. But until we, and I know that officers will also keep their eyes open for best practices in this area, and if they see new opportunities, I have no doubt they'll bring them to us. But in the meantime, we need to increase, and for me the big issue here is to increase the biodiversity target. And this, as we've heard from both speakers tonight, is a way of achieving that. So I wholeheartedly endorse the end of the trial.
Councillor Osborne-Smith is the seconder. Do you wish to speak to the motion or reserve your right?
Reserve my right, thank you.
Councillor Tawney.
Thank you, Chair. I have too grappled with this, but too with my hat of the community on and the best interests of the community. I think our health history, our public health history is littered with cases where we have waited. The science, the argument was always the same, there isn't enough evidence. By the time the evidence was there, the proven evidence, it was too late for a lot of people. And I think I feel like we're at that crossroads again. Notwithstanding the report, looking around the world, there are countries that are banning it, there's lots of cases. It is legal in this country, I absolutely accept that, it's efficient, but I'm not convinced that approved means safe. And I think with my hat on about the community, and especially the younger members in the community, I just struggle with the concept of biodiversity and glyphosate or Roundup in the same sentence. I think there are credible studies we can see that raise the possibility of cancer, including the World Health Organization saying it's probably carcinogenic to humans. So I do want to acknowledge the extraordinary work of the Friends groups and volunteers, and the work that you do with Gardeners Creek. And I understand weed control is difficult. We hand weed our own garden. I know that that's not the scale we're talking about, and I just can't justify the use of a chemical that poses potential long-term risks to soil, water, habitats and humans. And I think if it costs more, like in this case $18,000 more a year for one particular area, I'm not saying ban it immediately across the municipality, but I'd like to see a gradual ban, and I think this is a good place to start. I think it's easier now to act on the uncertainty rather than to deal with the consequences later. And I think I commend that to my fellow councillors. I think I'm probably pretty much on my own here too, except for Councillor Bookie. Thank you.
Councillor Pattis.
Thank you, Chair. I think words like safety, we have to be careful how we use those words because the word safety can be a bit subjective. I think it's important that we always fall back on science, and it's not, we shouldn't be making decisions where there's an absence of science. And as one of the speakers said tonight, there is more at risk by those people that are preparing this chemical, that are getting it ready for sale, than those people that may be impacted from a usage point of view. There is no evidence that this is unsafe for our community, that presents harm in terms of, from the point of view of science. And there, if we sat here and we made decisions based upon either emotion or historically, and not looked at the actual science, and we've done a trial, we've looked at all of the evidence that we have presented to us. We've had eminent speakers who have spent 30 to 40 years studying this area and have provided opinions. And who are we to make decisions? We're not the experts in this area, but we have had the expertise here. We've listened to it, and I think it's incumbent on us to make a decision based upon science, not based upon if, and words like risk and safety, we have to be careful how we use them because they do have an emotive component to them. I'll be voting for this. For the motion, I would like to ask though the mover would they be prepared to incorporate a third component to this? As the speaker said, the way we communicate this to the community, so if we do make a decision, that it's important how we communicate this to the community, that we maybe leverage people that know the subject very well, and that we communicate why we've made this decision and what the impact of the decision is. I would be very wary of a report like this with the detail going out to the community. I mean, obviously the community can look at it, but I'd like maybe a third part of the motion, something to the effect that we put together for awareness of our community why we've made this decision. And would the mover, through you, Chair, be able to incorporate that in the motion? Especially taking into account scientific expert opinion.
Councillor Friend-Pereira, would you be happy to include something like that in your motion?
Yeah, I think something to the effect of a plain English summary of our report, maybe limited to 1 or 2 pages, and perhaps also incorporating the Mayor's request that the sites be regularly updated. That could be added to the same webpage that we have all of our weed management information on at present. Perhaps the governance team can do a little quick wordsmithing to give us something. Thank you. I am more than happy if Councillor Pattis is happy with that point 3. I'm more than happy to include that in the motion.
Councillor Osborne-Smith, are you happy to continue seconding that motion?
Yes.
Yeah. In that case, we will move to Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you, Chair. I'll begin by saying I will support the recommendation before us and want to thank the officers for investing considerable time bringing a detailed report to us of what has been a study over many years. As the Mayor has stated, I think everyone in the room has had concerns, and I came here tonight unsure of how I would vote. So this is evidence that, you know, our involvement in the chamber, listening to presenters, listening to officers, it is something that we all take very seriously and deliberate and give a lot of thought to. I was particularly impressed this evening hearing Professor Macleay speak, and it's the first time that I've actually had the good fortune of hearing an expert who's spent his life working with herbicides and has a very good sound knowledge of glyphosate. So a lot of his responses to the questions asked by councillors helped allay some of my concerns. But I'll begin by saying that with weed management, there's always an element of risk and care, and whether it's the chemical or the use of the chemical or the application of the chemical, there's also a risk to our community and council officers and council contractors. If they have to access areas that are very difficult, rough terrain, slope land, access to retainers that are, you know, very high to reach. And if you can't get a shovel or a weeding tool down there and you need a ladder and it can be unstable, it is a lot easier to use a wand that can actually spray chemical into that area. And it's quick, it's effective, it's longer lasting, it contains the spread of weed, and it just makes life better for our community. when they can enjoy a weed-free area. And I know we'll never be able to contain every weed at every site at every moment of time, but I have worked closely with our Friends group, with the Friends of South Surrey Park, with the Friends of Back Creek Reserve in the Linden area, and I know how hard it is to recruit volunteers, retain volunteers, and see them week after week, you know, on knees or working with a shovel, trying to do it manually. It's a huge ask of our community, and as the presenter said this evening, Alison Wright, it's much more pleasurable for our Friends of Volunteer groups if they can see the rewards and appreciate the growth of new biodiversity corridors. And if their focus was purely and simply just on removing weeds, then we wouldn't have the beauty of renewal of vegetation, and they wouldn't enjoy the pleasure of seeing their hard labour's work come to fruition. So I support the use of the herbicide treatment. I believe it's probably the most effective and best available. There will always be concerns, but what herbicides won't bring concern? This one has gone through a high degree of scrutiny. Again, I'm grateful we had the trial. I thank our community, and I will leave it there. Thank you.
Councillor Ibuki.
Thank you. I'll be voting against the use of glyphosate. The fact that so many authorities and organisations qualify their endorsement with phrases like use with caution and apply responsibly tells us something, that even where it is permitted, there is some concern about its use. For me, I have heard residents who have expressed unease about the use of chemical herbicides in our parks, playgrounds and nature strips, places where children play, people walk their dogs, and our volunteers and our staff work regularly. At a local level, people expect council to act cautiously where there is uncertainty about health and environmental impacts. The well-being of our residents and the trust that they place in us, I feel, must come first. And we have alternatives available: mechanical removal, steam weeding, organic herbicides. And while they may require more labour adjustment, they better reflect the community's expectations for safer and a more sustainable approach. And so for these reasons, and in response to community concern and the concern that I have heard, I will not be supporting the continued use of glyphosate. Thank you.
Councillor Sinfield.
Thank you. I will also be supporting this motion tonight, and I trust that part 2 of the motion gives officers sufficient flexibility to apply it as is needed. I've been on this journey, as Councillor Hollingsworth has, for many, many years. Glyphosate is something that has been the topic of discussion over my 9 years on council, but I note that very few people have contacted me about their concerns, bar one Solway resident. Many people contact me in relation to the efficient and effective use of council resources to ensure that public spaces are looking as they believe they should be looking, neat and tidy, and that our finite resources are used appropriately. We are so spoilt by the contribution of our residents, and I thank our submitters tonight, particularly Professor McLean. It's a credit to our officers that a professor of his world-leading standing is endorsing, to paraphrase, or you know, in support of this report that he has read tonight. So that's a real credit to our officers. Personally, I'd like to see the continued use of goats across the city. I think they're a fabulous asset to our varied arsenal of weed-fighting tools that we have. And I'm confident that council staff and our contractors will continue utilising a range of alternative techniques while enhancing the appearance of our public spaces and biodiversity, which are all important to our community. So without hesitation, I support the continued use of glyphosate and this motion tonight. Thank you.
Councillor Franco.
Thank you, Chair. I too will be supporting the motion before us. I'd like to thank officers for their work they've done on this, on the trial and the report before us. I'd also like to thank the speakers as well, particularly Professor Emeritus John McLean and Alison Wright. I think receiving those comments has been very helpful. I'd also like to put on the record that every single representative from every friends group that I have spoken to on this issue has reiterated the same view to me, and also received correspondence from the Kooyong Koot Alliance as well, recommending the same approach. So that consistency is pretty strong. I'll make 3 quick points about my rationale as well. First, I think it's really important that we put science first and scientific knowledge and understanding at the forefront of our decision making. And in terms of, at the moment, the scientific view does not show undue risks, is at least my understanding of that. And it's not, and if the scientific research does change or does lead to separate findings, then it's incumbent on us to respond and change our decision making and at least review our decision making. But I don't think we should base our decision making on the possibility that the science in the future will show certain risks. I think we need to base it on the best scientific knowledge at present. And we've heard a lot about the cost comparisons and the cost benefits of using glyphosate. But it's not just about that. This is the other point. It's also about occupational health and safety of staff and members of the public. Looking at the issues of glyphosate in isolation and looking at the risks there isn't sufficient. We need to look at it in the context of the alternative approaches, whether it's the alternative herbicides and the risks associated with mechanical solutions. And we've heard both from Professor McLean and from our own officers of the OH&S risks of actually using mechanical and hand-based weeding, etc., and the risks to staff in respect of that, and potentially claims. And they're things that we do need to take into context. It's not just, okay, glyphosate has potential risks here if it's not managed, but the alternative processes also come with risks and costs. So, look, I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Councillor Nolan.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Look, this is one of those unenviable times, I think, for me personally, to be a councillor. I will be voting for the motion. I would love to be reasonably voting the other way, but I can't in all conscience do that. My rationale, I'm less persuaded by the dollars. I wouldn't be using dollars as a trade-off in this instance if it was $1 million instead of 100,000 and it was another 1.5 million on the road spaces. I wouldn't, and there was clear evidence, I would be not supporting the motion. But, so just putting those two things with hesitation, I think the things that I want to see happen in this council is tree canopy and biodiversity really move the dial on that. Just 2 points that sort of clinch it for me. I don't think there's many people in this country who would, I hope I don't get in trouble with this, trust Monsanto and Monsanto's reach and Monsanto's ability to persuade and threaten legal cases, etc. So I've gone to the Europe, and the European Court of Justice in March 2019 ordered the European Food Safety Authority to release all carcinogenicity, I'll probably pronounce that poorly, and toxicity pesticide industry studies on glyphosate to the general public. So that's the European Court of Justice in March 2009, it ordered that to happen. And subsequently, the EU said that classing it as a carcinogen is not justified. So I'm persuaded by the Europeans. I always like to see what they're thinking, and I have a lot of confidence in the officers. And if things change, like Councillor Franco said, then I'm very confident we'll review it. But I'll be voting in favour. Thank you.
Councillor Osborne-Smith, you reserved your right. Did you want to speak to the motion?
No, I think my colleagues have done a more than adequate job on that, and I endorse the comments of Councillor Sinfield, John Friend Pereira, Councillor Hollingsworth, Franco and Nolan. I would simply say that in difficult decisions like this, we must be mindful that perfect should not be the enemy of the good, and I think this is one of those cases. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Before I move to Councillor Friend Pereira for his right of reply, I'll just put my 2 cents in, which is simply that I work in chemical emergency response and will be spending much of next month doing an advanced course in that as well. And the key takeaway from the many years that I've worked in that space is that all chemicals are fundamentally dangerous. What matters is how you handle them, and that you handle them safely, thoughtfully, and with consideration for best practice. And I'm confident that our officers will do that every day. Councillor Friend Pereira, would you like to have your right of reply?
Would just briefly thank all colleagues, whether opposing or supporting the motion. I think we've conducted the discussion in a very rigorous and transparent fashion, and one that I hope we'll continue to apply in the next 3 years when we come up against similarly challenging decisions. And that is all I have to say.
I'll now put the motion to a vote. All those in favour? All those against? All those abstaining? I declare the motion carried. Councillors, we now move to items of general business. Are there any matters of general business? There are none. We now move to items of urgent business. Councillors, are there any matters of urgent business? There are none. Confidential business. Councillors, are there any items of confidential business? There are none. Before I close the meeting, I want to thank all of you who have joined us this evening. It's been a robust discussion. I declare the Service Delegated Committee meeting closed.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to the called meeting of 13th of October. Can I please have a motion to resume the meeting? Councillor Friend-Pereira.
I move a motion to resume the council
Do I-
meeting.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Osborne-Smith.
Yes, happy to second. Thanks, Chair.
Anyone opposed? No. All those in favour? I declare the meeting resumed. So before we commence this meeting, I request that all mobile telephones are turned off or switched to silent. Thank you. I acknowledge the Wurundjeri Wurrung people as the traditional owners and original custodians of this land and pay my respects to elders past and present and extend that to elders from other communities who may be here today. Good evening, everyone. My name is Councillor Sophie Tawney and I am the Mayor of Boroondara City Council. I'll start by introducing my fellow councillors. Seated to my left at the horseshoe table, Councillor Lisa Hollingsworth, Councillor Shimera Bookie, Councillor Michael Nolan, Councillor Felicity Sinfield, and to my right we have Councillor Victor Franco, Deputy Mayor, Councillor Mal Osborne-Smith, Councillor Rob Baillieu, Councillor John Friend-Pereira and Councillor Chris Pattis. I acknowledge in attendance this evening our Chief Executive Officer, Mr Philip Storer, and our Manager of Governance and Legal, Mr Brian Wee. There are other officers in attendance tonight and they will be introduced as required. Please note the council meeting is being live streamed on council YouTube page so you can watch the proceedings of the meeting, councillor deliberations and voting. And the meeting will also be recorded and made available on the council website shortly after the meeting. I'll now move to apologies. Mr Wee, are there any apologies for this evening?
Through you, Madam Mayor, Councillor Galt is an apology this evening.
Thank you. Now we'll move to item 2, declaration of conflict of interest. Councillors and council officers, are there any conflicts of interest that you wish to foreshadow for the matters on the agenda tonight? No conflicts, thank you. We'll now move to the presentation of officers' reports, but there's been a suggestion that we might change the order of business tonight, and we can do that by resolution or consensus. And the suggestion is to move item 3.2 to the first item on the agenda, given the people in the chamber tonight here to hear that one. Does anyone object to moving that? We don't have to move a motion. Does anyone object to that? We all consent to the change? Thank you. So we will now move to item 3.2, which is the Community Heritage Nomination Process Group 1, removal of 23 Clapham Street, Balwyn, Amendment C412 Borough. This item will be introduced by Charles, it is, I was just checking, by Charles Windire, the Manager of City Futures. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. This report informs the Council of alterations undertaken to the building at 23 Clapham Street in Balwyn and the implications of its inclusion in the Heritage Overlay through Planning Scheme Amendment C412 Borough. 23 Clapham Street, Balwyn was nominated for heritage protection under Council's Community Heritage Nomination Process. It was progressed in accordance with the standard process, and following a resolution of the Urban Planning Delegated Committee, it was included in a planning scheme amendment to apply the heritage overlay. Officers have become aware that works have been undertaken to the building and have obtained advice that it no longer meets the threshold criteria for heritage significance. On this basis, it is recommended that it be removed from the planning scheme amendment. After the publication of the agenda for this meeting, correspondence was received from planning consultant Ratio, acting on behalf of the owner. This correspondence confirms the owners are supportive of the property being removed from the planning scheme amendment. The correspondence also raised an issue with a date referred to in the report. The date provided in the report is the date when the owner provided further heritage reports to Council showing changes to the building's roof. These reports were not provided to Council as part of the planning scheme amendment process.
The officer's recommendation also notes that officers will engage with the Department of Transport and Planning about potential mitigation measures to increase protections against inappropriate alterations after properties have been assessed as having heritage significance. And I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Councillors, are there any questions of officers? No questions. Councillors, I'm in search of a motion then. Councillor Abuki.
I'm happy to move the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Nolan.
Happy to second.
To assist the mover, is anyone opposed? No. So Councillor Abuki is the mover of the motion. Do you wish to speak to it?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. This is a disappointing outcome and one that highlights the complexities and tensions around preserving heritage properties and people who buy into Boroondara. Despite the community's considerable effort in identifying and nominating this property for protection and the detailed work that followed, the alterations carried out before a heritage overlay could be applied have unfortunately meant that the building no longer meets the threshold for heritage significance. It's a pity that more people don't realise that you can in fact preserve a heritage building and still have the best of both worlds. Protecting heritage doesn't mean freezing a place in time or stopping progress. It means understanding and valuing the stories, craftsmanship and character that make our neighbourhoods special, while finding creative ways to adapt them for modern use. I want to acknowledge and thank those who took the time to nominate the property. It takes a great deal of work and community commitment to bring forward these proposals, even when the result is not what we have hoped for. This case has also revealed vulnerabilities in the current framework, particularly the gap between identification and formal protection. I thank and welcome the officer's intention to discuss this with the Department of Transport and Planning so we can explore measures to help prevent a similar occurrence in the future. And I'm pretty much left with no other option but to accept the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Abuki. Councillor Nolan, as the seconder, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Yes, through you, Mayor. Thank you. Just very briefly, commend the officers for a lot of work that's gone in prior to put the heritage nomination up. Boroondara is very supportive of heritage housing and valued by our community. I saw some solar tiles yesterday which people wouldn't recognise that they were solar tiles at the Electrify Expo. So there's lots of things to do to preserve our heritage houses. So this is quite disappointing. I'll reflect Councillor Abuki's comments on that as well. And but yeah, happy to support this recommendation. Not happy to, but we'll support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nolan. I'll now put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? I declare the motion carried. We'll now move back to item 3.1 on the agenda and the adoption of the annual report. This item will be introduced by Nigel Morris, Director of Customer and Transformation.
Thank you, Mayor. The purpose of this report is to present the 2024-25 annual report to Council for endorsement. This report provides a comprehensive overview of our performance against the annual budget for 24-25 and the Boroondara Community Plan. It also provides key achievements, operational information and audited financial and performance statements. It's been prepared in accordance with Section 98 of the Local Government Act and accurately reflects Council's operations and financial position for the financial year. Following adoption, the annual report will be made available for inspection by the public. Thank you, Madam Mayor. That concludes my comments.
Thank you, councillors. We will go to questions, but I would first like to say that I'm very proud to present the 2024-25 annual report a comprehensive overview of the work Council has delivered over the past year to support, serve and invest in our community. Each year, Council delivers hundreds of services that residents use and rely on every single day, from libraries and waste collection to maternal and child health. This annual report provides a snapshot of those services, the investment behind them, and the strategic direction guiding our work. A significant achievement this year has been the renewal of the Boroondara Community Plan, our overarching 10-year roadmap that will guide Council's priorities from 2025 to 2035. This plan was shaped by the voices of the community, with more than 5,500 residents participating in one of the most extensive consultation processes we've ever undertaken. Your input has been invaluable in helping Council understand and focus on what matters most to you. Thank you to everyone who contributed. Over the last year, we have made strong progress on several major projects. At Glenferrie Oval, the refurbishment of the tuck stand is well underway. Once complete, it will serve as a regional hub for women's football and youth sport, delivering upgraded change rooms, amenities and public spaces. And over the last year, we saw the recommencement of construction at the Kew Recreation Centre. The build is progressing and once complete will offer a state-of-the-art facility for health, fitness and community connection. Last year, we also celebrated the completion of several play space upgrades across the municipality, including at Winton Road Reserve in Ashburton, Kellett Reserve in Kew and Burwood Reserve in Glen Iris. These revitalised spaces are already being enjoyed by local families and reflect our commitment to safe, inclusive and fun community spaces for children of all ages and abilities. Our libraries continue to be a cornerstone of community life, with more than 972,000 visits and over 2 million loans recorded across the year. Libraries in Boroondara are more than just books. They are places for learning, for social connection, digital access and lifelong development, and their popularity speaks volumes about their place in our community. All of our work is underpinned by a clear focus, delivering exceptional value for our community today, while investing in a strong, sustainable and vibrant future for Boroondara. Of course, none of this would be possible without the ongoing support and dedication of our hard-working council staff. On behalf of all my fellow councillors, thank you for all your contributions, your partnership and your ongoing commitment to making Boroondara such a special place to live, work and connect. Boroondara's future is incredibly bright and I can't wait to see what the next year holds for our community. Thank you. Councillors, are there any questions of officers? Councillor Pattis.
Thank you, Mayor. I totally agree with your sentiments. The 24-25 annual report presents a fantastic good news story to our community, providing necessary services and amenities. But it also provides, I think, some bad news for our community, driven by our state government in an era when costs of living is a major concern for our community. So I'd like to ask a question about whether the following is correct. We raise 213 million in rates each year, but 26 million of this is due to cost shifting, where we pay for things that the state government has stopped funding or imposes costs on us almost as their tax collector. That's 12% of our rates, representing about $321 per household each year. Also, we raise an additional...
Councillor Pattis, I'm just looking for a question in this. Can you get to the question?
The question is whether you can please ask for confirmation of the following. Also, we raise an additional 30 million each year on behalf of the state government in terms of the fire services levy. That's about another 14% of rates that is raised and passed directly to Victorian State Government. So, is it true that over a quarter, 26% of every rate dollar that we collect is either council acting as a tax collector for state government or making up areas where the state government has either stopped funding, like library services, or charging our community in excess of actual costs, such as waste going to landfill. Is this the sad truth in our annual report that every ratepayer should also be aware of?
Ms Allen, would you like to answer that question?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Pattis. So I will just confirm, so in terms of the estimated cost shifting, you are looking at about 12% of the rate income, which equates to per household about $321 that they contribute to that as well. That's just for the cost shifting. In terms of the fire services levy, you are correct, it does equate to about $364 or so. That ratepayers do contribute to the fire services levy. Now, council does just act as a collector from that perspective, so it's collected through the rates notice on behalf of the state government, and then 100% of that is passed straight back on to the state government, so council doesn't keep any of that. Does that answer your question?
Councillors, are there any further questions of officers? If not, I am searching for a motion. Councillor Franco.
I'd like to move the officer's recommendation. Thank you, Mayor.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Pattis.
Yes, Mayor.
To assist the mover, is anyone opposed? No. As the mover of the motion, Councillor Franco, would you like to speak to it?
Just very briefly, given that there's no opposition, I just want to state that I strongly support every comment that the Mayor made in presenting this report. I don't need to go over those points. She's articulated the achievements exceptionally well, so I'll endorse those comments.
Thank you, Councillor Franco. Councillor Pattis, as the seconder, do you wish to speak to the motion? Thank you. I'll now put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? I declare the motion carried. Thank you, Mr. Morris. Thank you, Mr. Morris. We'll now move to item 3.3, review of the instrument of delegations to delegated committees. This item will be introduced by Mr. Brian Wee, Manager of Governance and Legal.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Mayor. Council conducts its business efficiently through the use of delegations, including delegations to committees of councillors. Previously, council, or currently council, has two delegated committees, the Urban Planning Delegated Committee and the Services Delegated Committee. The Local Government Act requires council to refresh those delegations within 1 year of an election. This report brings these delegations to council to refresh. They are in identical terms in terms of powers for those delegated committees. However, they have been refreshed in two ways. One, by simplifying the terms of the delegation for more plain English, and secondly, changing the names of the delegated committees from the Urban Planning Delegated Committee to the Planning Delegated Committee, and from the Services Delegated Committee to the Community Services Delegated Committee. Those are the current recommendations, but subject to council's will. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Councillors, are there any questions of officers? Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Wee, for explaining the reason of why there is change. But I'm just confused why the word urban has come off. Can you go into detail? Was that at Local Government Act?
That is a reflection of feedback received from some councillors around the table that urban planning was perhaps slightly more opaque than simply planning.
So does that mean moving forward the urban planning meetings will be just called Planning Delegated Committee and we're completely dropping the word urban?
If the motion is passed, or if that's the will of council, then yes, that would be the case.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Abuki.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair, and I'm confused about the change for the other committee. So I understand that the delegation scope remains unchanged for the services delegated, but I don't quite understand the rationale behind the particular change in terminology. The term community services seems to imply that it will focus on matters with direct community involvement or impact. whereas in practice we also address a range of core operational and organisational matters that don't necessarily relate to specific community-focused outcomes, even though everything that we do is for the community. So, for example, road materials submissions to state government, sale of car parks and so on. So could you just explain the rationale there, please?
Once again, it reflected comments from some councillors around the table. However, as indicated, it doesn't change the scope of the delegation and the powers that that committee can exercise on behalf of council. So if council were minded to, then that name could also change as per council's will.
Thank you. Councillor Pattis.
Thank you, Mayor. Two questions I'd like to just clarify. Item 9 of the officer's recommendation refers to the Services Delegated Committee, yet item 5 refers to the Community Services Delegated Committee. So there's use of both. Should we be removing the word community and just referring to the Services Delegated Committee?
Item 9 is the item, the resolution which cancels or removes the instruments of delegation, so it refers to the old committee rather than the current committee.
Yes, that should have been obvious. Second question, the limits to the delegation, which is the $20,000, the $20 million, should that be in our officer's should that be part of the recommendations? Because it doesn't seem to be that it's further down. In other words, should we be clarifying that there's a limit to the delegation?
In my view, Councillor Pattis, the delegations do speak for themselves, but the limits reflect the delegations that were previously in place. As I mentioned, this is largely an administrative change, but it's subject to future change if council chooses to change the scope of its committees following following years.
Councillor Franco.
Thanks. A question perhaps for clarification for the members of the public and others. In relation to the Urban Planning Committee or the Planning Committee, where it sets out the delegation, but in the instrument before us, it doesn't set out those matters that automatically do come to the committee and when they come to the committee. And where is that articulated on what are those criteria? Thanks.
Mr. Walker, would you like to answer that question?
Again, through yourself, Mayor, my understanding is that they are outlined in the delegations and they explain, the delegations explain what matters are automatically triggered to be brought before the Planning Delegated Committee or the Urban Planning Delegated Committee, as it has been, and those matters where there is a process in which a decision needs to be made, whether they're brought before the Urban Planning Delegated Committee, and those that are automatically delegated to officers for a decision. So they are outlined and articulated in the delegations.
Just to follow up, so in the report that we've got, it's not outlined. So perhaps whether there's somebody else or the governance manager or that could articulate precisely where.
Through you, Madam Mayor, the delegation to officers makes clear what it is that officers are entitled to deal with without reference to council and what it is that must come to council. So that already exists in adopted council or council delegated approvals.
And just to finalise on this point, when will, is that instrument reviewed by the elected council? And when will that next be reviewed, or is it scheduled to be reviewed?
Those delegations are regularly reviewed. I believe they're reviewed every 6 months, but I can clarify, and I'll have to take the question on notice in terms of the next time those delegations are due to come before council.
Thank you.
Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate I've already asked one question. I felt I was the only one that was a little bit vague on this before us this evening, and I felt I'd missed a briefing, but I'm sensing that there's a lot of questions and a little bit of confusion. And I wanted to ask through you, Mayor, if it would be possible to put a motion to defer this until we've had time to fully understand the impacts of what's proposed.
I understand, Councillor Hollingsworth. But I don't think it's a name change, so I think let's run it through and see if the name change goes through. It's not changing anything else substantially, Mr. Wee.
It's not, and I might point out that there is a legislative requirement.
You can move a motion if you want to.
Look, I'd like to test the motion, but I also want to allow everyone the opportunity to ask questions. I don't want to stifle the debate.
So we'll just do a round of questions?
Yeah, I foreshadow I will move a motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hollingsworth. Councillor Friend Pereira.
Thank you. Can I just get confirmation that this issue about the names of the delegated committee, that at any point Council reserves the right to change the names of its delegated committees?
That is correct. It could come back at any time to a council meeting and change its delegations.
In that context, I will make the following statement. I urge colleagues to consider being strategic, meeting legislative compliance requirements, and avoiding unnecessary complications. And if we have strong feelings, we can come back at some point prior to electing new chairs and things and refine the names. And perhaps that is the best way to do that at this point in time. Thank you.
So, sorry, Councillor Friend Pereira, can I just clarify what you're saying is to not...
I'm saying I support the recommendations that are currently there on the logic that at any point in time we can change the names of the delegated committees, that the substance of the motion of what's being recommended is the delegated
We're not in debate.
Thank you, Councillor Franco. I'm seeking clarification and ensuring that we're all on the same page.
Your question is that we're not changing anything else but the name, and the name could be changed at another date.
And that the substantive purpose is the delegated authority.
The substantive purpose is to preserve these committees because there is a statutory obligation to do so within 1 year of a general election.
Councillor Osborne-Smith.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm also a little confused by this proposal, and perhaps contrary to Councillor Friend Pereira's suggestion, I would think that given we are looking at committees forming for 2026, that may well be the appropriate time to address any name changes. Personally, I don't have a great deal of support for the name changes. I think.
Do you have a question? This is questions for officers at the moment.
Yes, okay. Would it be as appropriate to consider the names of these committees when we go about settling the makeup of these in the coming months?
There's no reason why you couldn't change the names of these committees in the current months. Indeed, there's no reason why you couldn't revert to the previous names of the committee for this meeting. The obligation this council has is to refresh its delegations within a year.
Thank you.
Councillor Simfield.
Mayor, I was going to suggest that it might be appropriate to suspend standing orders for this discussion. I don't have a question per se, but that might buy some time for an alternate motion to be drafted if that's what Councillor Hollingsworth was thinking.
Councillor Hollingsworth, were you thinking of an alternate motion or a deferring?
I was actually thinking of a deferral laid on the table, whatever governance would advise is the best option to allow us an opportunity to have this to come back to the chamber.
There is no motion. There is no motion.
No, just deferring the discussion. So Councillor Hollingsworth can put forward a motion to defer. Is that what you're wishing to do? Or are you happy that if we went for standing orders, suspend standing orders, we could just have a bit more of a discussion?
I would prefer to defer, and I agree with Councillor Osborne-Smith that I don't think this is the appropriate time to make a decision of name change. I would rather wait until we have the annual election of mayor and chairs to determine if there was going to be a restructure of name then.
Councillor Hollingsworth?
Sorry, Councillor Bailey, I'm just going to go to Mr Wee to respond to something Councillor Hollingsworth has said. Thank you.
Councillor Hollingsworth, I'd just like to note that we do not have, if council decided to defer this until after the election, council would be in breach of the Local Government Act. And hence, it needs to be, the delegations need to be refreshed within 1 year of the election, which is by the next council meeting at the very latest. So the option to defer pending the elections, which is due in November, is an option that is too late.
Thank you, and excuse me for my confusion, but my 9 years in council, this has never been put before me before, so it's new and I'm just unsure of the process, but look, I'll be guided by my councillor colleagues if they would like to.
Can I go back to Councillor Sinfield, then Councillor Hollingsworth? I think it might be a good idea to suspend standing orders and see if we can have a discussion and flesh this out now, because we do have a time restriction on us. Happy to move that motion.
Such a motion.
Do I have a seconder?
So seconded.
Thank you, Councillor Bailey. Anyone opposed? All those in favour? Declare standing order suspended. Okay, well, I'll just move through the list that I see on my screen, so if you want to speak, we're still going to go through that. And I've got Councillor Pattis next, then Councillor Sinfield. Thank you.
I think it's highly inappropriate that we're being asked to change the name of a committee. I don't know what's driven that. I don't know who drove it. I don't know where it's coming from. The report doesn't actually even say that. The report doesn't identify that the purpose of this, I understand the purpose is to refresh the delegation. Got no problem with that. And I would be happy for someone or myself to move the motion without the name change. Why are we doing the name change? I don't see the rationale for it. We haven't had a discussion for the name change. And that's what caused me the confusion initially and why I asked the question. And then I sat back and I thought, maybe I wasn't at the meeting when the name was changed. And, you know, I'm going to sound stupid. So I think it's really inappropriate that we're trying to do two things, one of which was never asked for. So the question is, who asked for the name change? When did that discussion happen?
So, Councillor Pattis, that came through the Governance Advisory Committee. Is that what you want to talk about, Councillor Bailey?
So this was raised back in February.
March, yeah.
And March.
With council. When was it raised with council?
This is the first time it's been raised.
Through the Governance Committee. I don't believe it was ever decided on.
Then it's inappropriate.
Bemused it's come up tonight without prior discussion.
If it's never been brought back to us, whatever committee, if it hasn't come back to council, scrub it.
Can I just ask a question of councillors? Do you think the name Planning Delegated Committee makes sense?
Mayor, it's irrelevant what we think about the name. We haven't had a discussion. Now is not the time to have a discussion about the name. We've never had it.
Thank you, Councillor Pattis.
CB&D is the appropriate time to talk about a name, not here. So
thank you, Councillor
I'm foreshadowing, changing the motion to scrub the name change and to have the refresh.
Councillor Sinfield.
Thank you. For the benefit of my colleagues, my position on this is maintaining the current name set, and should the motion that has already been foreshadowed fail, I too am interested in putting such a motion.
Councillor Franco.
I wanted to ask a question about a simple way of handling this, and I'd like some advice from officers. If it seems we need to refresh the delegation, so that's pretty much a straightforward matter, and I don't think there's any issues. The issue at contention is the name. Is the simple solution to simply put the motion and see what name gets supported? And part one. And part two, and I'd just like some advice, so that might simplify the matter. Secondly, if the name does or doesn't change this evening, there is chance, is there not, when we come to re-establish the committees in late November to revisit the name then one way or another? Could officers comment on that?
When the committees are re-established or the chairs are appointed, there is absolutely no reason why the council resolution can't also change the name to or back.
Thank you.
Councillor Friend Pereira.
Thank you. So, look, a rose by any other name is still a rose. The substantive element before us tonight is the delegations, not the names. I don't mind what we call them. We have to get the delegation passed tonight. I think perhaps a solution, somewhat inelegant, is to then just leave it to the delegated committees to decide on their names at their first meeting. As in, revert back to the traditional names, and at their first meetings, each delegated committee can decide whether or not they want to proceed with a name change. But the substantive scope of their work is unchanged. So we're getting caught up on a purely esoteric name issue.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Simfield.
Just conscious of the implications of changing a name once, let alone twice, for officers on all of the templates and documents and everything else. It just doesn't change the substantive fact that there's a delegation that we've got to pass. So I think that the conversation about changing names should be held at a different time and we just get the delegation done.
So do we think that now we might return away from suspending standing orders and come back, and there might be amended motion on this? Are we ready? Can I have a motion to resume standing orders? Councillor Simfield.
So moved.
And the seconder, Councillor Friend Pereira.
Seconded.
Anyone opposed? No. All those in favour? I declare the motion carried. Declare the meeting resumed. Standing orders resumed. Councillors, is there someone who is prepared to move a motion? Councillor Pattis.
Thank you, Mayor. I was wanting to move the officer's recommendation, but to amend any part of that recommendation that refers to a name change.
Mayor, I think we have a foreshadowed motion that hasn't been withdrawn, do we not?
Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Simfield. The motion I've foreshadowed was a deferral, but in light of the degree of urgency and the fact that, look, potentially this could wait till the next meeting, but I'm happy to be guided by councillor colleagues. I would be happy to allow Councillor Pattis.
Councillor Hollingsworth. So returning to you, Councillor Pattis, I think we're just seeing some changes go up on the screen now.
Just remove community. That's it.
Not return.
Well, we didn't make the change. We didn't, it came to us. That's okay. It came to us. I'd love to know who made it. It's not governance.
Councillor Pattis, can you have a look on the screen and see if that motion is... And report back the word urban. Do I have so you're happy with that motion? Do I have a seconder? Councillor Friend Pereira.
Happy to second.
To assist the mover, is anyone opposed? No. As the mover of the motion, Councillor Pattis, do you wish to speak to it?
Very briefly, Mayor, I'd just like to reiterate that in the future, if we are intending to propose name changes or any substantive change to these committees, that they be done through the appropriate process, which is for all council to be present, and CB&D is the right vehicle to do things like this so that we can have a proper discussion. But the effect of this recommendation is that we refresh the delegation as per our legal requirements.
Thank you, Councillor Pattis. I'll now put the motion to a vote. All those in favour? I declare the motion carried. Councillors, the next two items on the agenda deal with confidential information as defined by the Local Government Act 2020. The first item is confidential because it contains personal information which, if released, would result in unreasonable disclosure of information about any person or their personal affairs, Section 3(1)(f). The second item is confidential because it contains council business information that would prejudice the council's position in commercial negotiations if prematurely released, Section 3(1)(a). Consequently, I'm searching for a motion, as appears on the screen, to close the council meeting to the public in accordance with Section 66(2)(a) and subsection 3(1) of the Local Government Act 2020. Councillor Friend Pereira.
I'd like to move the...
Madam Mayor, just before that is moved, if I may, I'd like to, in the public section of this meeting, declare a conflict in relation to item 3.4. I'll be leaving the room when you discuss that matter.
Thank you, Mr. Storer. Councillors, do I have a mover? Councillor Friend Pereira.
Yes, I'd like to move the motion to close the meeting.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Pattis.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Anyone opposed? No, I'll put the motion to a vote. All those in favour? I declare the council meeting closed to the public. To members of the community watching tonight's proceedings, the live stream will cease while the confidential business is being discussed. We will reopen the meeting to the public at the conclusion of the discussion. Thank you. the members of the community watching tonight's proceedings, welcome back to the live streaming of the council meeting. This brings us to the end of the order of business for this meeting. Thank you to all who have joined us in the gallery and online this evening, and I now declare the council meeting closed.